My name is Rachel Green, and the last time my ex-husband underestimated me was in the school parking lot right after parent-teacher night. He stood next to his new wife, all polished and proper in her designer coat, and introduced me to someone I already knew too well, my own daughter. "At least the army pays her something," he said with a shrug, as if explaining away a bad habit. He laughed, like it was a joke, like I hadn't just spent the last 10 years rebuilding my life from scratch. His wife, Brittany, smiled politely, that kind of practiced sympathy people use when they feel superior. My daughter, Emily, 16 and painfully aware of appearances, didn't say anything. She just gave me that look, the one that mixes embarrassment with pity, like she couldn't quite figure out if she was sorry for me or ashamed of me. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself. I just told Emily it was time to go and led her back to my car. She sat quietly for a minute, then asked, "Why don't you ever say anything when he talks like that?" I glanced at her and said, "Because I don't need to." She didn't understand yet. Emily lives in her dad's world, the one filled with lake houses and country clubs and college counselors before you even hit junior year. She's grown up thinking value comes with a price tag or a name on a diploma. Derek made sure of that. Every time she came back from a weekend at his place, she looked at me a little differently, like I was something slightly less. That day in the parking lot, standing between their luxury SUV and my Honda Civic, I could see the truth starkly. To them, I was the ex-wife from nowhere, with a vague army job and a modest apartment. But what they didn't see, and what they never cared to ask about, was the truth behind the uniform I wear, the rank I earned, and the life I built while they weren't paying attention. I grew up in a place called Whispering Pines Mobile Home Park, just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. The name made it sound prettier than it was. Our trailer was faded blue with a rusted porch rail and a cracked screen door that never closed properly. My mom worked nights as a nurse's aide at the county hospital. She'd leave before dinner and come home just as I was getting ready for school. I don't remember her ever sleeping much, just sipping lukewarm coffee and reminding me to lock the door when I got home. My dad left when I was 5. No warning, no goodbye, just one less toothbrush in the cup on the bathroom sink. After that, it was just the two of us. And Mom, sharing a thin-walled tin box that shook when the wind picked up. We didn't have much. I wore clothes from Goodwill, carried a backpack held together by duct tape, and ate free lunch at school. Kids teased me for smelling like thrift store fabric softener and for the way I said y'all with a country drawl I didn't know I had. But I learned fast that the world didn't care if you were tired or embarrassed. It just kept moving. So I studied. I read everything I could get my hands on. I stayed late at the library because it was quiet and warm, and no one asked questions. School was my safe zone. I wasn't the girl from the trailer park there, I was the girl who knew all the answers. Straight A's, perfect attendance, extra credit, you name it. I knew if I wanted a different life, I'd have to earn it myself. I watched other kids get picked up in SUVs while I walked home past vacant lots and busted fences. I saw their moms bring cupcakes for birthdays while mine slept off her shift. I didn't resent it. I just understood early that some of us have to build the ladder before we can climb it. By the time I hit high school, I had a plan. Get a scholarship. Get out. Change the story. I didn't know how yet, but I held on to that goal like it was oxygen. I wasn't trying to be extraordinary. I was just trying to escape being invisible. I met Ethan Chandler in my sophomore year at Oklahoma State. He was in the pre-med program, drove a spotless black Jeep, and wore those Patagonia vests that screamed money without trying. I was there on a full scholarship for mechanical engineering, juggling classes, and a part-time campus job just to afford groceries. Ethan thought I was grounded, said he liked that I wasn't like the girls from his private school in Dallas. I thought he was my chance at something better, a real future, one where I didn't have to choose between paying rent and buying textbooks. He brought me into his world Sunday brunch with his parents, ski trips over winter break, wine tastings where I pretended to know the difference. His mother would smile with tight lips, always asking when I planned to finish school, like it was a hobby I could take or leave. I laughed it off, thinking I'd prove myself eventually. We got married when I was 22. A small ceremony. His family paid for most of it. 2 months later, I dropped out to take a job at a law office front desk so Ethan could focus on med school full time. It felt noble, even romantic. I was helping us build a life. I pictured dinner parties, a house with a porch, maybe even trips to Europe. I didn't realize I was laying bricks for a future I wouldn't be invited to share. Looking back, I see how young I was. I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought if I gave enough, worked hard enough, Ethan would see me as his equal. But the truth was, I never belonged in his world. I was the helping hand, not the partner. And by the time I realized that, I'd already traded my degree for a marriage license. By the time Ethan finished his residency, I'd been answering phones and managing calendars for almost a decade. He had a corner office and a white coat. I had a resume full of admin jobs and a diploma I never got to finish. He stopped looking at me like a partner and started treating me like an inconvenience. Conversations became corrections. Dinners turned into silent sessions of him scrolling through his phone. When he finally said the words, "I think we want different things," I knew what he really meant was, "I think I've outgrown you." The divorce moved fast. He had lawyers, connections, and a story that painted him as stable and successful. I had a small savings account and a name still on the lease. He got the house. He got full custody. I got weekends and holidays and child support that barely covered private school tuition. I signed the papers, walked out of the courtroom, and sat in my car shaking, not from heartbreak, from rage, from shame, from the sudden, terrifying realization that I had nothing to fall back on. That night, I stayed up Googling options, jobs, school programs, anything. I didn't plan it, not really, but 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a recruiter's office, listening to him explain officer candidate school. He said I was a little older than most, but not too old. He said the Army didn't care where I came from, they only cared what I could do. I shook his hand and signed the papers. I was 29, and I was starting over. Officer candidate school was the hardest thing I'd ever done up to that point. I was older than most of the others, a full decade past the average recruit, but I kept up. Sometimes I outpaced them, not because I was the strongest, but because I knew what it meant to grind when no one was cheering. After I commissioned as a second lieutenant, I was assigned to logistics. Not exactly glamorous, but I didn't care. Logistics is the lifeblood of the Army. It's making sure every soldier downrange has the food, fuel, weapons, and gear they need, exactly when they need it. I learned fast. Supply routes, fuel convoys, inventory tracking, and deployment timetables. I managed warehouses the size of football fields and tracked shipments worth millions. And every success, every smooth operation, every crisis averted was mine. Not because someone gave me a chance, because I earned it. 2 years in, I made first lieutenant. At 35, I was promoted to captain. By then, I had deployed once to Afghanistan and once to a forward operating base in Kuwait. I led a team responsible for equipping over 2,000 soldiers across 3 regions. I didn't just survive under pressure. I thrived. The Army didn't care about my past. It didn't matter that I didn't finish college on the first try, or that I used to answer phones at a law firm. They looked at my performance, my leadership, and my ability to adapt. That's what they rewarded. That's what counted. When I pinned on a major at 38, I didn't tell many people back home. Derek thought I was a supply clerk. Emily figured I sat in an office somewhere, filing reports. I didn't correct them. I was too busy doing the job, too focused on leading my soldiers and running operations with the precision of a Fortune 500 CEO. One day, I was coordinating helicopter drops. Other days, I was sorting emergency shipments by headlamp in the middle of a blackout. My team looked to me for answers. And I had them, not because I was the smartest, but because I listened, I learned, and I showed up every day ready to carry the weight. The Army gave me something I'd never had before. Not just a paycheck or a career, but respect. Real, earned, undeniable respect. And in that world, rank wasn't given. It was proven. I wore my achievements on my chest, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself how far I'd come. No one in the civilian world ever asked what it cost me to get here. But my soldiers knew. My commanders knew. And every stripe, every medal, every long night under a desert sky told the story without need for words. I wasn't the girl from the trailer park anymore. I was an officer. I was someone people trusted to lead. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to explain my worth. It spoke for itself. The email came through early on a Tuesday morning. I'd made the promotion list. Lieutenant Colonel. I stared at the screen for a long time, my coffee going cold, my heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt in years. I'd known I was ready. My file was solid, but reading it in black and white still made me sit back and breathe deep. I called Emily right away, told her I wanted her at the ceremony. She paused, said she'd try. But she and Brittany had a dress fitting for a hospital gala that weekend. I asked if she could reschedule. She said, "Mom, it's just work stuff, right? You've had promotions before." I said this one was different. She said, "I'll try." She didn't. I didn't bother telling Ethan. He never asked. I'd spent years trying to explain rank and command structure, and it always ended with him saying, "Well, good for you." He might as well have thought I took up knitting or joined a book club. So I stood in my dress uniform in the battalion conference room, surrounded by fellow officers and soldiers I respected, and watched my commander pin the silver oak leaf on my shoulder. I gave a short speech, said where I came from, what it took to get here. The room was silent. Then came the applause, loud, proud, from people who understood exactly what the moment meant. My mother sat in the front row, holding a crumpled tissue. She wore her best church dress, the one she saved for weddings and Easter Sunday. She cried the whole time, whispering prayers under her breath and smiling like she could barely believe it. Afterward, she hugged me tight and said, "They finally see what I always knew." I smiled, thanked her, and blinked hard to hold back tears. Because in that room, full of uniforms and respect, the two people I'd wanted to see me most weren't there. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't break me. It just made me understand who had always been watching. Emily called me one evening, her voice hesitant like she was already expecting a no. "Career day is next week," she said. I asked Dad, but he's in surgery. Brittany's got a client meeting. There was a pause. "Would you be able to come?" I smiled before she could change her mind. "Of course," I said. Then she added quickly, almost like she was bracing for something. "What would I even say? That my mom's in the army?" I waited a beat, then said, "You could say your mom is a lieutenant colonel, that she's the executive officer of a battalion with over 800 soldiers, that she manages logistics operations across multiple countries and is responsible for millions of dollars of equipment and people's lives." The silence on the other end was long. I could almost hear her blinking, trying to connect that version of me to the one who picks her up in a beat-up sedan. "I didn't know that," she said quietly. "I thought you just worked in an office or something." I told her that I work in an office when I'm not in the field, deployed, or running missions. Her voice got smaller, almost like she didn't want me to hear her shifting perspective. "Will you still come?" she asked. I told her yes, and something in her tone softened when she said, "Okay, that would be cool." She didn't say much else before hanging up. But in that small exchange, I heard something I hadn't heard from her in years. Curiosity, maybe even pride. And for the first time, I realized she was starting to see me not just as mom, but as someone worth understanding. I walked into Emily's classroom in full dress uniform. My blues were pressed sharp. My silver oak leaf insignia gleamed under the lights, and every ribbon on my chest told a part of the story I'd lived through. The room quieted the second I stepped in, and for once, I didn't feel out of place. Emily looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, then slowly, like she couldn't help herself. Her eyes lit up. "Mom," she whispered, "you look important." I smiled and said, "I am." I spoke to the class about military logistics, about how we move supplies through combat zones, how timing and precision can save lives. I told them about my soldiers, about responsibility, leadership, command. The kids asked questions, smart ones, and I answered every single one with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from doing the hard work. Afterward, Emily's teacher came up and shook my hand. "Lieutenant Colonel Green," she said. "That was the most eye-opening talk we've had all year. Emily must be so proud." I turned to look at my daughter. She stood there, arms crossed over her chest, like she was trying not to smile too much. "I am," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded, thanked the teacher, and gathered my things. But inside, something shifted. For years, I'd tried to explain my worth. That day, I didn't have to. I simply showed up. And in that moment, it was enough. More than enough. The call came out of nowhere. Ethan didn't even say hello, just opened with, "Emily says you're a lieutenant colonel?" "Yes," I said. "Since January." There was a long pause. Then, "I didn't know. I thought you were enlisted or something, like a supply clerk." I didn't bother correcting him further. I just said, "I've been an officer since I was 30. I've deployed twice. I command soldiers." Another pause. Then, softer. "Would you maybe want to have dinner? Emily thinks we should, acknowledge this properly." I agreed. Out of curiosity, more than anything else. We met at a quiet restaurant. White tablecloths, low lighting. The kind of place we used to pretend we could afford. I wore my uniform. Emily had asked me to. Ethan stood when I walked in. He stared at the insignia on my shoulders like he didn't quite believe it. Brittany stayed quiet through most of the meal, and when the plates were cleared, Ethan looked at me and said, "I owe you an apology. I spent 10 years minimizing you, acting like what you did didn't matter." He looked down, voice lower. "But the truth is I just didn't understand it, and I didn't want to. You built a life. You became who you are." I didn't say much, just nodded. "I forgive you," I said. He looked surprised. "Just like that?" "I don't need your approval anymore," I said. "I already know what I'm worth." He nodded slowly. "Emily's lucky to have you as her mom." I looked him in the eye and said, "I know. Right now, I'm 4 months into my deployment in Kuwait. I'm the executive officer of a logistics battalion, overseeing operations across 3 countries. Every day, I make decisions that keep soldiers safe, supplies moving, and missions on track. Emily writes to me every morning. Her emails are filled with questions about what I do, what leadership means, and what it took to get here. She's even started looking into ROTC programs, thinking about her future in ways she never did before. Ethan sends care packages now. Notes tucked inside with words like, "proud," and "thank you." He's respectful, supportive, but I don't need that from him anymore. The truth is, I spent years chasing validation, trying to prove I mattered, trying to make someone see me. But the moment I stopped waiting for recognition was the moment I started living fully on my terms. I know who I am. I know what I've built. And I know no title, no rank, no apology will ever define me. I define myself.